maybe it'll be better this time.
Or maybe it'll still be awkward. This is Alex, and this is the awkward conversation state.
I'll sit back. Okay. How's this?
Awkward.
It is
Right?
called awkward conversations in real estate. So I can't ever pronounce your name, so I'm gonna have you say it.
Sure. Onadia.
Onadia.
Yeah.
It's O-N-A-D-I.
I-N-D-I-A.
I-N-D-I-A.
Yeah, it's a basket.
Onadia.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Okay. How do you two know each other?
So she's super smart, and she does the numbers for Boise. You work for Boise State, but Boise Regional Realtors contracts with Boise State to do the data.
So we've been doing like the market updates every month for like the past year and a half now.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Okay.
So, and whenever I have a weird quirky question, she would calculate the data for me.
Okay.
I sometimes play dumb with my husband because he's like a calculator without a calculator. And so I would just sit there and fumble, and he would sort of help me, and then I'd send it to Taylor, and she would send it to Maria, and she would correct it and give us better data.
Yeah, so I think we started off with just like Ada, Canyon,
Elmore?
Gem, and Elmore,
Yeah.
and then now we have like the Four Rivers region in there as well.
And you sometimes do Boise County, right?
I haven't done Boise
Oh,
County.
you haven't?
No,
There's not very much data there.
probably not. That's why like the four, like Oahe, Washington, Payette, Malheur, we kind of like have those all together.
All
It's
together.
Same thing, right? Where Payette has a decent amount of data, but the rest of those counties don't have a ton.
Yeah, just not very many sales.
Like not month to month, no.
Yeah. It's funny, there's not as many sales. I remember announcing how many sales a couple of years ago. And there's, I think, 6,000 agents or ish. There's a few less than that in Boise, in just the BRR, so not Canyon County. And we had like 6,000 sales for the year or something like that. Is that
Yeah,
right?
that sounds
So
right.
it's like one a person.
Yeah.
But then you meet people that did 100. So you're like,
Someone's doing something.
Someone's doing something right.
Somebody's taking votes away from those people.
Yeah.
Right?
So we do have a lot of real estate agents compared to the sales.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people think that, because you're an agent and you sell so much that there's a lot of pie to go around, but it's not huge.
No, especially like I feel like, post-COVID there's a bunch and now it's kind of like tempered down where it's still more than it was like year over year, but it's much closer in line now, like across kind of all counties in terms of sales numbers.
How many sales there are.
Yeah. So like comparing like February this year to February last year is still a little bit higher, like in, all the counties that I named, but it's getting closer to kind of, like it's no longer like 20% higher, it's more like 5% higher, 10% higher.
Of number of sales.
Yeah,
So like
number of
Canyon
sales.
County sales versus Ada County sales are similar?
No, like Canyon County sales in February versus Canyon County sales in February last year.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. So not similar
No.
county to county, but similar from
No,
the year
like Ada's
before.
still got like the most volume by far,
Right.
and then Canyon, and then the rest is,
All the other
trickles a little
places.
bit down, yeah.
Yeah. What about prices? How do you see prices?
I mean, it's the same, very similar in terms of like prices sit in most counties, so above where they were last year, not far above, but I think it's kind of this, moving to kind of a more like permanent kind of median, like in terms of, there was a lot of price growth, and then I think now things are a little bit more tempered, but I think things are still setting, you can look at like Ada County is going to sit above Canyon, which is, then you get into some of these smaller counties and things get a little bit more interesting, like, I think like homes in like Gem and Elmore will kind of look more in line with a lot of places in like Canyon, but I think where prices get interesting is where you start kind of looking, instead of Ada County as a whole, like comparing, Boise to Meridian to different areas. So like, prices, median sales prices in Boise are the highest out of all of those areas. And then if you're thinking about, the interesting thing about prices is that resale homes are going to have a really high variance, meaning the highest of the high and probably the lowest of the low that are available are most likely going to be, homes that are a little bit older that are being sold again. Whereas new homes, I think their median sales price will tend to be a little higher, but there's less variance, just meaning all of those prices are a little bit closer together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you look at Boise, do you look at Eagle and Star too? Or
Yeah, I think
because Eagle's median price is quite high.
it is. I think that's
Yeah, it is higher. There's less. I think they have a pretty consistent like level of volume in Eagle. I would say where the lowest prices have been, and kind of a lot more like in terms of new home sales, has been centered around like Meridian and Cuna, like at least in the last 6 months.
And those are the lower price homes in Ada
Yeah,
County?
usually I think in terms of lowest price new homes in Ada County, those have been in Cuna for the last 6-ish months.
Okay, so affordable houses there. What's affordable?
It depends who you ask. I think that when you're looking at a median sales price that's kind of more like above, typically you'll see a lot of things when you kind of put everything in order and look in the middle around like 500,000, but you can see homes that are more closer to 400 out in Cuna, but not necessarily in Boise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have clients that are both, okay, so the sellers always want their price to be higher, so they're hoping that the prices have gone up. And you said they're kind of leveling out. But then buyers are like, oh, well, there's a little more inventory, so I can make a deal. I can try to get a deal. But are you seeing a big difference between list price and sales price?
I think I don't think it's necessarily a big difference. I think that recently it has trended that the sales price is slightly lower than the list price, but I think that a lot of things are within the range of like 25,000, which is like obviously like a significant amount of money, but proportionally to the price isn't a ton. I would say that one of the things that you can kind of look at in order to see if a home is going to have any sort of change in that, what we've seen a lot of correlating with that is the days on market. So there are two different measurements in the MLS for days on market, and the way that it's calculated is typically an average. So you have to be a little bit careful because there occasionally will be a home that's sold that's been on the market for like 3 years, and it'll really throw off that metric, and you'll think days on market has gone up a ton, when in reality it really hasn't.
It's just one house.
Right, or you just have to, especially in those smaller counties with the smaller amount of volume, like one home can actually, probably not going to throw off Ada County or Canyon County, but could really throw off like an Elmore County where 35 homes are sold every month. So that's one thing, and then there's also a cumulative days on market, which has been really interesting to look at, which is, if a home is taken off the market temporarily but put back on the market within 90 days, that days on market number will reset, but that cumulative days on market number will not reset. So in some cases, you can see homes that have a big discrepancy between those two numbers, and then often there's a price change associated with that. So either like something's come off the market, the price has been lowered, and then it's been put back on to kind of refresh that clock and hopefully attract buyers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said $25,000 is, and that's not an insignificant amount of money.
No.
But what is that percentage? Because sometimes I have buyers that are like, so can I offer 25% less? And I'm like, no, we're not at a Target, Christmas sale.
Yeah, I think we're looking at a lot smaller, right? Like I'm thinking, under 10%. Like it's, a smaller markdown. That's not like true of everything, but I would say that just kind of that's the typical proportion we'd see. But I do see I know last month we reported on this, but well over like 3/4 of homes in like certain counties had a markdown associated with it, but it, like I'm saying, I'm not seeing like huge substantial ones.
They're just
kind of at the margin.
All right. What are some numbers you think sellers should pay attention to?
Yeah, I think that there's, I'm looking at my notes. I think if sellers looking at similar, homes around them, but I think that those same metrics, so thinking about days on market, so how long things are staying on the market before they're pending. I think looking at, the median sales price associated with homes that are of like a specific age and in a specific location seems to be more of what determines kind of pricing, at least in this area. So like you can have a 20-year-old home in different areas, but they'd be priced very differently just based on where they are. I think keeping track of kind of interest rates. I think that interest rates have been like a big topic. Rates gone up, and then it's like when is the Federal Reserve going to cut rates? But there's a lot of kind of in terms of when you're thinking about things on like a 30 or 60-day timeline, like those announcements about changes to interest rates happen, kind of on a monthly and quarterly basis. So just be responsive to those things. I think the inventory pieces are important if you're able to know, like we can talk about this more about going more in depth into MLS data, but if you kind of know if inventory in your area is going up or down, especially, in Boise, if you have an older home, those are typically priced lower and they do not remain in inventory very long. Like a lot of those homes in Boise have been selling in under 30 days, like for the past year. So kind of being cognizant of like, what are the environment or the demand that you can see. Because when inventory goes down, just like less choices for people.
And I've noticed just anecdotally for me,
Yeah.
that you would think on like a $400,000 or less house would sell very quickly, but that it actually is the other price points that seem to be selling faster. In my perception, do you find that to be true as well?
I mean, I have seen that like stuff that is priced lower has sold quicker, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the other thing's not true. Also, I think there are pockets of homes that like exist everywhere that are selling at different rates. I also think it very much depends on like the area. And I think like we spend a lot of time with like Ada County and Canyon County information just because that's where like most of the volume is.
Right.
And I just know for Boise specifically, just anything in general, I think anything that was that was over 20 years old was selling around like 34 days. But that's not to say that there aren't like pockets of, or that those homes aren't priced really high, right? Like they could be. Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And concessions. Have you seen concessions change? Have you looked at concessions?
I have not. No.
Do you see concessions changing? Because you get to see that stuff.
I mean, I think there's still a trend going on right now. I'm just wondering if there's more coming up because they realize that if they're not providing that, they may fall out of contract.
And concessions is not commission. So concessions is that the seller is giving
Snacks.
Yeah. They all get orange fingers when they're done with the Cheetos.
Right. No, I mean, we're seeing it. I wouldn't say that it's on everything or off the bat right on the original contract versus counteroffers, or I guess they wouldn't really put on a counteroffer unless they change the price along with it. But I mean, we're seeing it. I just wouldn't say that it's a trend where it's consistently a majority of them.
So you wouldn't tell a seller you should really offer a concession?
I would. I can't advise on any of that
I
stuff.
know that. But like based on what you're seeing.
We're seeing a few more credits showing up in the RA10s rather than cancellations. We hope that we're seeing that.
And the RA10 is an inspection addendum, so that's the buyer asking for repairs.
Mm-hmm.
So break that down.
Hopefully seeing more of those than terminations, because it's hard for me to put myself in that because I'm only dealing with a smaller pocket of transactions. But
Do you think you see more cancellations?
not too many. We're always hoping for none, but they do show up every once in a while.
Because you do the work and then you lose it.
We
You
do.
lose it, and
Yep.
sometimes you don't get it back.
We ask for it back, but it doesn't always happen.
Yeah. All right. So what about buyers? What should they be thinking about?
I mean, a lot of the same pieces. I think that, what we've been able to kind of see is the, viewing kind of days on market from an opposite, perspective. If you are a buyer, like assuming that if something has been kind of sitting there, that you might have a little bit more agency kind of in like the negotiation process. I think, and then also on the contrary, kind of knowing that if you're looking for a specific type of home at a specific price point, knowing that if something does come up in inventory, how quickly you need to act, right? Versus like how much you can kind of afford to like, look around. And I think that depending on the area too, just with, I know it's not, a global trend, but like this last month inventory declined in a lot of places. And that's like not a huge amount, but that has been a little bit of, we've seen that kind of across all of the counties. And I think just being aware of, this gets more into like the MLS data, but like what types of homes are not being added to inventory month over month. Yeah, and then I think just all of those same pieces, right? Median sales price, being cognizant of like what a similar home is, even looking at sold data, right? What similar homes are being sold, and then being responsive to interest rates if that's like applicable. And then also, there's a lot of different types of, one thing we can see in the MLS is like how a home is sold. So like what types of like loans or things like that. And that we've been starting to look at the relationship between, if FHA loan, conventional loan, VA loan, and how long it's taking to close on those homes. Obviously, like people close at different times for different reasons, but we're just looking into seeing if there are trends around that. So sometimes I think as a a buyer thinking about like the timing of all of those things. I mean, you would know better than I would, but I've also like bought a home, so I know it's just like can get complicated.
Yeah. So are you seeing more more sales? Like it's so funny. In 2020, I heard, "Oh, everything's being sold cash," and I was like, "Really?" And so there was a guy in my office who's kind of a nerd, and he started calculating
Does
it,
he
and he
know that?
was like, "Yes."
Okay.
And he put 25. It was like 25 to 30%.
Yeah.
So I was at NAR and I saw the economist and he was in line in front of me and I said, "Hey, I have a question for you." I said, "We are seeing 25 to 30% cash sales in Idaho," and he goes, "That's standard across the country."
Yeah.
and it's
And that
still
sounds about
now.
Yeah.
And so when you hear the words "everybody's paying cash," it's
Yeah.
not ever been true.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a quarter or a third to a quarter.
I think that's right. Yeah. From what we've seen, it'll fluctuate like month over month, especially. I think that how people are purchasing homes is something that we really look at in some of these smaller counties because, like we did housing summits out in like Emmett and, in Elmore in Home. And I think that there are all these like homes being built and there's like a perception with like the, people there that, like you're saying, people are coming in and buying homes in cash. And sometimes it's true. Some months there's a higher proportion, but in general, I do think you're right. It's right around like a quarter to a third. One thing that we think is interesting is just, the number of, like there's a part of our housing analysis is we kind of keep a pulse on like all of the news pieces that might have to do with like real estate in general, but also like specific to Idaho. And I think that something we've been interested in is just like first time home buyers. So people using FHA loans to purchase homes, just because there was an article this year about like the comparison between median wages in Idaho and then median sales price of homes, specifically in the Treasure Valley. And just out of all the, states in the country, it's like one of the largest gaps. And so that's a piece that we found interesting. But, there's also VA loans become more significant when you think about like counties like Elmore, which actually is very interesting that Elmore County has like fluctuations between how many people are buying homes month to month, but pretty much the same number of VA loans are being used to purchase homes every month. So that doesn't really have a seasonal, a seasonal move. It's just kind of a very constant brace. Yeah.
Air Force Base
For sure.
in Elmore County.
Yes,
so
yes.
Why that's
And it doesn't shift like at any. I know they were interested if there was seasonality to it, and there really isn't. Just kind of the constant. Yep.
Vincent's coming up.
Yeah.
Right? Is that trackable with what you do? Trying to figure out how many or how many transactions there are that are non-traditional financing. So cash, seller carryback, 1031 that are purchased in entities. Like, is that trackable? Are you able to?
You can definitely track cash sales for sure.
Okay.
I think seller carry is marked in the
I think
MLS.
so. Yeah.
But does it
I don't know about.
But does it mention the buyer on what type of buyer is closing on these
Not in the MLS.
transactions? Okay.
Yeah, it's all
We
seller
know who
side.
the listing, so they know
Yeah.
that I sold it
Yeah.
for a buyer.
Okay. That would be interesting to figure out if there would be eventually a way to do that. To keep track of these, because now that it's nationwide, we're going to have to keep track of it here and report it. But as far as
Yeah,
I
transactions
bet they could add if it was an individual and then a trust,
Yeah.
a corporation.
you would
They
think
could
so.
add that
but it
field,
would
but it would
always
be
have to be done at
MLS.
the time that it actually, I don't know what the process is for once it's on the market, now it's pending, now it's closed, right? Is there a button that you push to mark that? So could you mark it at that point?
Yeah, you
It's
do
something that
update it
You
multiple
do,
times.
you mark it when you
As
close
you
it,
go.
you
Okay.
tell it how, if it was cash or conventional or.
Okay.
It also does get marked as pending. Like, but I don't think there's any
We don't
additional
mark,
data fields.
no, it's just
that-
pending and when the date is that
Yeah,
it closes,
yeah.
so, but when it closes, we do mark how we close it and if there's concessions offered, because it helps the appraiser. So if it's information like that, you could probably, as an industry, request it from the
I
MLS.
think it'd be kind of interesting to figure out, just as we
Yeah.
move forward with this new process, is it going to be impactful to be able to know that data or not,
I don't know,
right?
have you seen crypto?
As far as
Have
what?
people asked for crypto closings?
Well, like as far as using funds from that
Yes.
type of currency, we can't accept it. What if they give us the funds 2 weeks before closing and the value
Changes.
goes down? Or who benefits from it if the value goes up? Right, I think it's just too fluid at that point to be able to Liquid, fluid.
Does it work like the stock market? That's what I'm guessing.
That's my understanding. That's
So
why
it'd
we
be
can't
like saying,
accept
I'll
it.
give you some Albertson stock for your house.
Sure.
Right, it's like, it's a thing where the value of it isn't
Mhm.
constant.
So if they
Like,
sold it
yeah.
at this point, got money for it, and then used that money for that, that's one thing. But if they provide, here, I'm gonna give you this, here's 3 pounds of gold,
Yeah,
that would change. So,
All right, that makes
no,
sense.
not acceptable at this point.
Not acceptable.
No.
not acceptable.
And when we say cash transaction, it's not like somebody's coming in with a Ziploc full of cash. It's
No.
not a briefcase, it's like a Ziploc. It's
So
people,
the Brinks truck is not really for that.
if they pulled up here, I don't know why they would be here, but you're correct. That'd be a lot of cash.
Can you imagine?
What kind of denominations those are in?
We sold a boat once and it was the most cash I'd ever held in my
Okay,
hand.
what'd you do with it? Then run it to the bank so you didn't lose it? Is my face even in the camera?
I know, your
It's
nose
fine.
is.
I'm over it, it's fine, I'm
I'm
relaxed,
over
You
it.
could
I'm good.
scooch, I mean,
Now you don't have to worry about your hair.
there's a big gap
Right,
here.
thank you, okay?
Well, your hair's in it.
Anyway,
All right, well, I don't remember what other questions I had, but these are all really interesting.
Yeah, I know you asked a little bit too about metrics that are easy to pull from MLS and then things that might be a little bit harder but might be worthwhile. Things that are super easy, finding like your median sales price is easy, just putting numbers in order of lowest to smallest for sales price. Average days on market is easy, that's an easy just average. The things that are a little bit more challenging, and then sales volume, like just counting the number of homes is easy. There's also things in there that I find interesting, especially for like we're talking like about new home sales. Like Idaho is unique in that like out of all the states in the country, we also have the highest proportion of homes for sale that are new compared to like overall homes for sale. So you can also group things by subdivision, which can be interesting when you look out in inventory and you see, oh, there's a subdivision in Meridian that has 40 homes in inventory. But I think other things that are interesting is we're talking about prices, right? And we see like, I feel like month over month, you'll see prices went up, prices went down. But I think it's important to remember that the prices that are being calculated month to month are based on the homes that are sold that month, which means like we were talking about differences in prices, right? If I sold more new homes, that's going to change my price. Does that mean that the price of homes went up? Kind of, right? It means that this, out of all the bucket that we pulled for February, the prices were higher, but it doesn't actually mean that like things might be priced differently than they were last month. It's just more what was sold that month.
But you're calculating what's marked as sold in February,
Yes.
like Alec is closed,
Yes.
and so it could have actually sold in December.
Yes, whenever it closes. Yeah.
No, I mean like it went on the market in December,
Mhm.
and it was. So I had a listing that went on the market in early
Yeah.
December. We had an offer by mid to late December, but it didn't
Yes,
close
yes.
until February. So it's sometimes those sales
Right, could be
are
a delay.
showing
Yeah.
a delay in what was
Yeah.
happening.
100%.
Really, those sales are showing. So pendings might be a better number to look at.
Pendings could be an interesting number. You could
pendings at close, I think that could be a good metric to be able to look at, because.
pending to close. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
pendings that eventually
That actually
end up
close.
close, right?
Yeah. I think that's true. So that's very true depending on how long it actually took it to close and when it was pending. That can definitely be true where you're seeing differences in prices or even just differences in like the types of homes sold that actually occurred, months before, right? Pending sales and inventory are also things that you can see. The thing that is interesting about these is that when you kind of look at homes sold per month, like you said, we're pulling all of the homes that were closed that month. That list never changes, right? Like if you were closed in December, we can pull it now and we'll still see the homes closed in December. When we look at pending sales and we get kind of when I get that data month to month, there can be things in there that were in there last month, right? How long it takes. So I think when you kind of look at that information, and same thing for inventory, right? Inventory can go down, but there can be a home that's in there that's been in there for a year. Being within inventory, you can see how many days it was on market. So you can filter and look for things that were on market or for less than 30 days, and then you can see, okay, so here are the new ones that came into inventory.
Okay, so inventory increased this much.
Right, and you can specifically highlight which ones were added, right? So just by looking at how long they've been on the market, in that cumulative bucket, you can see what the actual change was. And then same with pending, right? You can look at the date that something became pending and kind of know, okay, we have this bucket of pending sales, but here are the actual ones that changed. Because you see that things will increase and decrease, you can always like, yes, that is true that it increased or decreased, but based on how much actually dropped off, you could have a bigger increase than you think, right? If 20 homes were pending last month, but then 15 of them closed, and now you have 25, that's actually a much larger increase than you would know if you don't highlight like kind of the dates that they became pending.
Okay.
Yeah.
And new construction can have really long pending dates.
That's a really tough one, right? The days on market and that kind of goes a little out the window when you start looking at new constructions. Yeah, so that one's tough. There is a filter in MLS where you can see if something is like new, never occupied, to be built. And so that can help you a little bit when you're kind of thinking about those days on market. But yeah, in general, we don't really report a lot on those just because we find it, like you said, they can go on really early. It's just, there's not a lot of, only if there's like a substantial difference that we see when we report on it. But in general, we don't put a lot of like stock into that value for new homes.
Yeah, and there's some builders that are not on the MLS at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't always give you a true picture of everything going on in
Yeah.
construction.
Yeah, but I would say that those pending homes are really interesting to look at if you have more time, and then understanding kind of the composition of homes sold every month. So I know that whenever I see like, okay, prices have changed, I try to figure out why. So, is it that we sold, were homes sold this month bigger? Were they located in a certain place versus another place? Were they a different, age bracket than normal? Were they more new homes than less resale homes? But like sometimes there is no reason that you can see. And then that's where it's kind of interesting, where you're like, well, these homes look exactly the same as last month, yet they were priced higher.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of my favorite statistics you ever did was the average increase year over year.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you guys are still tracking it, and it's changed a little bit when I talked to Taylor. So when we initially did it was October of 2024, and it was 6.7% year over year. The houses on average.
Was it the prices or the volume, like the number?
It was the average price or median price. I don't know.
Oh
which
yeah,
one we
median
used.
sales price.
Yeah, we did that year over year to show like a trend.
Mm-hmm.
So you could show the recession did
Yeah.
drop prices, but then 2020 they went way up,
Mm-hmm.
and now they've kind of leveled out. And it was interesting because when we first did it, I think it was 6.7, and Taylor said recently it was 6.3.
Mm-hmm.
So it is showing a trend in a little bit lowering, like the prices.
Yeah, like it's kind of tampering down and getting a little bit more like consistent month over month. Yeah,
But that's
And
one of my
year-over-year.
favorites because people are like, well, what's the value of owning a home? And I'm like, it's
still
you're
increasing.
going to appreciate 6.3%. Like what other mechanism of saving money gives you that kind of return?
Yeah, just seeing the value. Crypto.
Oh, all right.
Maybe.
Don't quote me on that.
When I hear the word crypto, I think video games, and I know that's totally wrong, but I
money in
play
that.
Clash of Clans, and you get like points and gems and elixir and stuff, and so crypto is like that to me.
Do you think it's fair, like, let's say that a house is on the market for 88 days, and one particular buyer is just kind of watching it, maybe they're waiting for that. Now that they're at a point, they've been watching it for that long, well, now there's a buyer that just comes ready to get on the market, right? Now they've only been waiting for 1 day, but it's been on the market for 88 days. Do you think it's fair that buyer that's only been looking for 1 day gets the same price reduction as the buyer that's been out there for
A lot of days.
Yeah, does that make sense from what I'm saying?
Kind of.
Yeah.
Like, they didn't have to start at the higher price and
Yeah.
wait. They
I
just
think
were
that's
able to
fair.
walk in.
Should there be something in the MLS where the agent has to say, my buyer is.
So like the
has
buyer gets a days on
Been,
market?
has been
Yeah.
looking for this long.
Oh, well, we've
How would
got
that-
some buyers that have been looking for years because they're waiting for interest rates to come
Yeah,
down.
so how would that? Never mind,
I think they're going to keep waiting.
But
Yeah.
it is true, like, how do you feel like interest rates, if you were looking at interest rates right now and they're 6-ish,
Yeah.
right? And the appreciation rate is 6, how do you talk to a hesitant buyer about the value of what they're getting versus this monthly payment? Because there's a lot of people that are like, it's a 30-year rent, fixed rent, right? There's that argument, and then there's the, buy the house, take the rate or whatever. There's this weird lingo in real estate where you like refinance it. So, but there's got to be like some kind of, I'm sure math people understand the threshold of you're going to gain this much and pay this much.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like an argument to be made, like you're saying, that like even though housing prices have kind of like not necessarily come down, but just like grown at a slower rate, like they still have appreciated year over year, right? So there's that piece of like, something is a worthwhile investment if it accumulates value. I think there's also just like the reality of interest rates, and that I think that I know when I bought my first home, you get a little we had like a 2.5% interest rate, and it's like, well, that's unfortunately not reality anymore. So I think there's also, with that as a recent memory, it gets really hard to like commit to something new just at a different rate. But I think that's just the reality of like I know rates are kind of have come down slowly, but I don't foresee that being any reasonable like goal in the near future. Like I think they're going to sit at 6.
Yeah, I haven't heard an economist out there say that maybe 5.5 or 5.75, maybe.
Yeah, no, and I think I would be surprised too. Like I think they're just going to kind of hold where they are.
Right at 6.
Yeah, because there's like little tiny like staying and like 0.25% kind of like changes, but I don't think anything major.
When I bought my first house in the mid-90s, I was so excited. I went home, I called my dad and I was like, I got 8%. And he goes, it should be 7. And I'm like, oh. So I called the lender and I was like, my dad told me it was supposed to be 7. And they were like, okay. Like they were kind of like, this was in Vegas. So, maybe it was like I don't know what it was. But I got 7, and so my brother was like, wow, you're really good at that. So when I bought I refinanced to get him off the loan, because I bought a house with my brother, and I got 6. He's like, you just keep getting better and better. And I was like, yeah. And so 6 kind of was a really, compared to 8, it was amazing. And now you talk about 2.5 as your first one.
Well, and I think that's the problem, right, is that now you have that memory, and then I think it also gets really challenging if you are already a homeowner, right, and you have a rate that's like, we went through this experience when we moved, was just like you have a rate that's lower that's locked in, and it's like tough to give that up. But the alternative is not buying. So
Yeah.
It's not going to change.
There is a pain threshold, and we
Yes.
talk about that all the time, where you have a baby and the baby can live in the primary bedroom with you for a while, but then it grows and gets bigger, and you're like, I don't want it in my bedroom anymore.
Maybe it's because you're calling it it.
Well, I didn't want to specify if I was having a boy or a girl.
Oh, are you?
Or other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And 6% doesn't sound so bad.
No, then 6% is like, can I sleep all
Give me
night?
room.
Yeah, can I
Yeah.
have a space? So there is a pain threshold with every life change that we
And that
go
is
through.
a good thing about like being in the Treasure Valley, like you're saying, is that interest rates are high everywhere, but like having a place where home prices have proven to like increase over time is something that's an advantage of like purchasing a home here versus other places where that might not be true.
And so you're younger than I am, and you bought a house at 2.5. So other people in your generation, how would you tell them that it's a good time to buy a house now, or should they wait?
I think it's it's very unique to their situation. I know for us, like my husband and I don't have any children. We have 3 dogs, so
Which you need space for.
We need space for them. So I think that I think this is also something that's a new reality for younger people. Is we purchased our first homes when we were 32. So like we waited a long time. Like we did live in other places that buying a home wasn't as feasible. We lived in like Chicago and other larger cities, but like we did wait longer because the conventional wisdom is that you're supposed to spend, I think, like 1/3 of your income on
Right, and
housing.
that's changing.
And that's just talking about like how wages compare to home prices, like that's not really a reality for a lot of people anymore. So I think you have to kind of do a little bit of that kind of evaluation of making sure that it's a sustainable choice, right? Like I can make it work in the moment maybe and purchase a home, but like making sure that it's something that you can like comfortably live with. And I know that took us time to do. But I also know that, as you do get older, it's wanting to have something that will appreciate value that, is like an asset versus just, kind of renting forever or basically throwing money away to be able to stay somewhere.
Yeah, I always tell younger folks, find a place you think you can live in for 10 years. If you have
That's very true.
You get a spouse, you get a baby, you get a whatever, a dog, something that will you'll be able to live there. So don't buy a cracker box. but also then find the price that you feel like,
And
because you're gonna get a raise, hopefully.
Yeah, and and like you said, it's not your forever home, but I do think also being aware of like, okay, this is the type of home that is going to be right for our situation now, right? Like I think that, especially when you rent, there's a lot more autonomy over maybe where you're going to be. You're just used to being in a very like specific or convenient location, and that might just not be a reality for like your first home. And so I think just knowing the type of home and the price point, and then being a little flexible, I think especially here with like location, just not necessarily leaving like Ada County, but just like where in Ada County,
Right.
is going to be a good choice.
Good questions.
It's great.
Isn't it interesting?
Yeah. Mhm.
She's one of my favorites. I was always very excited when I got to listen to her talk because she has lots of data. I like data. I'm kind of a nerd that way.
Yeah.
So what's one of the biggest things you've learned since you've done this for VRR? Surprised you?
Yeah. I think a lot of the things that I've learned have to do with what metrics impact other metrics. So kind of like looking through, when you're thinking about price, the metrics that we report on, right, are price, volume, days on market, inventory, and pending sales. So just looking at all of the different things that could potentially impact that has been interesting. So like it's always a little bit of a fact-finding mission every month where it's like this thing changed, like what could be a potential reason? And obviously, we don't know the actual reason. We can just use the data that we have to kind of point out differences, and then people that are closer to the situation can kind of assess from there. So I think that is interesting. I think that another thing I've learned that I feel is really interesting is just how things are very different in different counties. Just like the kind of vibe of the housing market, what they're concerned about. I know like going out into some of the more rural counties, they're very concerned about like people buying like really huge properties and like that come from other places and kind of move in. So you'll find that's really interesting. And then, 1 month you're looking through MLS data and you're like, all right, who bought a 100-acre home out here in like outside Emmett? I'm interested. And then you'll like go and look at it and you'll be like, well, that's interesting. I think that another piece that's been interesting too is just that since we have so much new construction, that we're also very responsive to like prices of materials for construction, which has been something that I've tracked, like the cost of like lumber and drywall and things that are imported into Idaho to help with the construction process. There's also really interesting permitting laws that go through the legislature that you can kind of keep track of. And then there are some really great sources for just like Idaho kind of like economic news. So one thing that's been interesting is tracking all of the transportation department projects around the Treasure Valley, because there are like places that are out in like Gem or just kind of out further away where they're building like highway connectors where you see developers buying up land, and it's just very interesting because I'll be very interested to see like what the prices of those things are, because a lot of those 84 connectors are going to become they're set to open in 2027. So I think that it's not outrageous to see like movement happening right now around that. So I think that's going to change a lot of like the value of homes, but also probably people's willingness to like kind of branch out of Boise. Because I think a lot of like, I know when we were looking for homes, but even just looking at data, like a lot of Boise is kind of like maxed out in terms of like new construction and like there's obviously a lot of sales volume happening there, but in terms of like building and expanding, like those places are largely outside of Boise, and then those have implications for like new school districts and new infrastructure that's going to exist out there. So I think it's a pretty interesting thing to track.
It is fun to pay attention that Highway 16 extension is going to be a game changer, I think, and I don't know that everybody's paying attention to it.
No, and I think that, because it's just going to open up areas where people, you're going to be more willing to be somewhere that it's going to be very easy to, connect and get.
I know. I think their hope is to get from Emmett to the freeway in 16 minutes or something crazy
It's
like that.
Highway 16, is that why they do
Yeah, and they're
that?
making it a limited, 16
And
or
it's-
16.
Yeah, it's kind of like a fast track. Like you're trying to not have.
Any stoplights.
Yeah.
So it's all going to be limited access.
Like Eagle and 10 Mile, right? Stoplight, stoplight, stoplight.
Yeah.
It used to
I
be a
think-
highway that could get you there in 7 minutes.
No. But
No?
this Highway 16 extension is supposed to be like, so that's going to change Emmett to me, like who lives there, because you can live there and get to.
Well, hopefully they'll get Emmett widened, from Emmett to the extension.
I think they are, and they're supposed to put on limited access at the free Firebird Raceway,
Okay.
and then limited access at Beacon Light, and floating. I think for sure 44, but
Yeah.
maybe Floating Feather.
So I'm driving, I don't know if the people that listen to this know the area very well, but I'm going north on Cole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm like, do I go up the hill to get on the freeway there, or take a right on Franklin to get on the freeway to the mall? Well, the lights are blinking for the train, right? How often do you see a train come through here? You hear the whistle, but there's no train. It's a truck on the tracks with things on it that's blowing what sounded like a train horn. I was like,
I think there's more than you think. Trains.
no, I was sitting there. Oh,
I know.
like trains in general, but I was like, that was it? But it sounded like a train. I had somebody on the phone, they're like, is that a train? I'm like, no, it's a truck. And I was, what?
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it'd be kind of cool. There's an existing, anyway, but would people adopt it from this area? Because if you're in a big city area, you're like, I'll take the train, and I'm okay walking 10 blocks. Here, 10 blocks
very
sounds
different.
like it's,
That's across downtown.
right?
You're
I
you've
lived
done
in
it all.
Chicago too, and
Yeah.
you wanted to take the L everywhere because parking was expensive.
Mhm.
Yeah, I didn't drive in Chicago.
Yeah. I mean, I could have. I had parking, so I didn't have to pay for it, but I would have. The L was everywhere.
Yeah.
And I lived in San Diego, and the whatever they call it there, I could literally walk out my front door and hop on and a trolley. It was a trolley and go downtown.
But people would be willing to walk from, say, here to RC Willie, right?
And
That's
in the city. They
that's
would.
what, 3 miles at the most, maybe 2, maybe 1. How far is it from here? It's like a mile and a half.
Yeah,
But
it's
would
not
people
three.
be willing in a big city to walk that far versus here?
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing about here, right? It's just I feel like the culture around like public transit's very different. That's also an interesting housing parallel. We work, I've heard a lot of talks from people that work with affordable housing in Boise, and like that is another piece, right? That people want like larger spaces,
Mhm.
right? So when you think about making things more affordable, that's usually the first thing that goes, right? Is to make a smaller space, but that's not like there's not the appetite for that here, right? Like people want space, and I think people want to drive.
In Chicago, you might be in a house, but there was no yard. And,
And people
you
are
would
just
walk-
okay with that.
You just took
Yeah.
their dog for a walk, or there was a park at
Yeah.
the end of the street, and so you would just go play. I mean, I would go to the park and play with my dog in the park with other dogs,
Yeah.
and I got to know my neighbors because I was in the park with them and their dogs.
Do you
Whereas
still
here,
talk to them now?
no. One of them babysat my dog for a week because I had a crazy. My landlord was crazy, broke into my apartment and went to jail. And there's
Is
a
it breaking in if they like own it?
well, if you rents it to you,
True.
yeah.
I don't know if it's in the leaves.
I
Yeah.
would hope that's
It was
This
at
is
like-
all like an admin stuff.
It was at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I have like very interesting, weird stories about things that have happened in my life that most people are like, huh, what are you doing to attract that kind of stuff? So, yeah, well, okay, what other numbers? So off the
off the track.
off the top of stalking landlords and dogs and
I mean, I feel like we've kind of
covered it all.
covered most of it, just in terms of like what's in the MLS. I think another thing that just looking at historical information too, we talk about year over year and you can see those proportions in terms of prices are this much higher, but I think you can do that same type of in-depth analysis. Just I think a lot of times, with our reporting, we're focused on like, okay, what was last month, what was this month, but just looking back farther to kind of get a hold of like some longer term trends.
Yeah, I when 2020 happened and we had 2 weeks of inventory, I think, in 2020, like January of 2020, I think we had like 300 or 400 homes on the market. It was very low.
Yeah.
And then I went back and I looked at 06, which was a similar kind of market where we were moving a lot of inventory and houses were selling. We had like 2,500 houses on the market. And
Oh, wow.
now we have like 1,500 or
Yeah,
something
that's
like
right.
that.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting when people are like, oh, we have more inventory. Well, we still are like so far behind what was kind of normal in 05, 06 so it's just
Well,
I like-
percentage-wise, that's a bigger deal.
well, we have more houses too. I mean, we should have more we've built more houses, so there should be
More inventory.
more inventory, right?
Yeah.
Am I thinking wrong?
No,
Matheism, I think.
I
I
mean, yeah.
You're a nerd.
I know, but I just
Not
like,
with
I'm
numbers.
like listening or tell me about the numbers. I don't actually calculate them.
Yeah, but it would be interesting. I know that when we did the housing summits last summer, that was my first time kind of like looking for kind of like a year in review. But it would be interesting to take a look at like pending sales or inventory and almost look at kind of what do those look at like on a home level, like comparing kind of, you know, this month to where it was a year ago, like how different or how similar is kind of the composition of all of that looking, just in terms of like how long things have been on the market, like how old homes are. I think that's always just an interesting one to look at. But yeah, we haven't done that yet.
And you calculate absorption rate, which is how long it would take if everything on the market today
Yeah.
was sold without adding any new inventory. That's what that's called, is absorption rate.
Mm-hmm.
And we have been in a seller's market mostly, and
Yes.
we've been like tiptoeing into a balanced market. And there are some buyers markets in parts of the area, depending on the location.
I think that's, depending on location there are. Mm-hmm.
But buyers, because we've got more inventory and prices have sort of like
They're more stable,
people think we're in a buyer's market where they can just demand whatever price, and that's not true.
No, especially just because the prices they're still slightly higher. And I still think that things are moving in a reasonable way where I don't think it's quite at the point where you can just demand whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
come in and go, you're too high, and I'm like, well.
And I think people have now been around enough where they also are going to have people saying to, you know, stay the course, right?
Yeah. All right, this has been super fun. Can people reach out to you directly, or do they have to go through BRR?
Generally, they go through BRR, and then BRR will contact me.
Okay,
Yeah.
So if you have questions about our market.
Yep.
And I like this this goes out so public people see it.
Yeah, for sure.
And industry people. Because like, is there something you would tell an industry person versus a member of the public about looking at the numbers or what they should be looking at?
I think it's always good to, I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with people, and people will often base what they think is happening off of their experience. And that's definitely part of it, but I would always just push people to go to the numbers, because I don't think, you know, judging by the MLS spreadsheets that I get, not super hard to navigate, especially, and this is especially easy if you're operating in a smaller market, because if you're thinking that, you know, looking through kind of 30 or 40 homes is not a super challenging task. Obviously, there's a little more finesse required if you're looking at a larger market, but I would always just try to base everything off of numbers. And I think when you are misaligned with those numbers is where it's interesting, but just also good to, you know, have the actual facts and data.
Yeah, and you're getting numbers off the MLS, so some folks may not understand that the MLS data is not always reported publicly.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking at other sources, including ChatGPT, they may not have the accurate information because they're not able to get into that platform because it's a member-only platform.
Yeah, and the way the the way the ChatGPT works is probably they're searching the internet and they're probably just pulling the market report that we already write and putting it up there. So it might be a little cyclical. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're looking at your numbers and pulling them. So that there are some fun things. I've done that rate for one area of town versus another.
Yeah.
Just to show.
That is true. You could, if you do have if it makes a difference one area of town versus the other, there are zip codes and level things that you can do. We generally don't do that just because I think when we're reporting it, it doesn't make a ton of sense to someone that's just reading the report as a narrative. But if that is something that you have a good awareness of and you want to know certain pieces of town, you definitely can do that.
Yeah. So if you're working in a code like 83702 or 83616, you can kind of narrow it down and compare whether it's better to buy there.
You can calculate all of those metrics just, you know, and break it up by zip code.
Okay. Just have to have some big notes from that.
Yeah, just gotta group it together. But it would be interesting to kind of.
Do you do math?
So I work with numbers a lot, but a lot of it does it for it, right? We can look at it to make sure that the number, based on what our knowledge of math skills would be, that it goes along with what it is. If you put three numbers in front of me and told me to add them and to subtract and multiply, I would probably have a difficult time doing it unless I got practice with it. But Excel does a great job. Programs do help you out with it. Right? Are they accurate or not? Like, is there somebody sitting in the back of the program thinking, let's just make it off by just a little bit?
Oh, your numbers.
Every number, right?
Yeah.
I'm unless you're doing the actual math yourself.
Okay.
Like, why is gas $2.99.9, right? Or whatever, it is, 9 cents, right?
I don't know.
I'm just not
Probably
even-
someone's making a profit somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. I when I took math, they had imaginary numbers. Like I had trouble with just regular numbers, and then they were like, "Oh, there's these imaginary numbers."
Yeah.
And my grandfather said, "Well, just put an imaginary answer," and I'm like, "I did, and I got it wrong." He was making a joke, like using the imaginary numbers, put an
Swear
imaginary
negative
answer, and I was like, "I did put an imaginary number, and they still marked it wrong."
Do you ever see Best in Show?
Yes.
I feel like the color commentator of the two. You have the one that really knows about dog shows, and then the other one's sitting here just making these weird comments. So that's kind of what we got going on.
Yeah.
Perfect.
We are a little bit like those folks. Yeah.
That was
Best in
great.
Show.
Not as funny as that guy, whatever his name is.
Oh yeah.
Fred Willard, right?
He is
Is that his
funny.
name? He's a funny guy.
He can quote movies, so thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
We appreciate all
Yeah.
of your help, and I love your numbers. I know.
Good. I'm glad that someone's
Yeah.
looking at them.
I think we all look at them. I
Good.
think as agents, we all look at those numbers, and sometimes I feel like we should explain them better
Mhm.
to the consumer. So, what kinds
Yeah.
of things? Let's just add one last question.
Yeah.
What kinds of things, if when they get those market stats from BRR, what kinds of things would they want to share with the consumer that showed they understood what the numbers were, or that it would make an impact on whether a consumer should buy or sell?
Yeah, I think explaining to a consumer how all of those metrics are calculated is important. Like, I think a lot of people might not understand, well, what could determine kind of a price or how long something's been there or whatever it might be. And then I think that anything in terms of buyer or seller, the more you know about a specific, whatever constraints or kind of specifications they have, right? Like if they're interested in a specific area, there's ways to look at the market report and kind of get a good grasp, even if it means looking at the market report for maybe the last 3 months, right? Like kind of getting a recent trend of what that environment looks like, but then also on the opposite end, if you're somebody that maybe doesn't have a constraint by location, but you have a constraint by budget or something like that, being able to be thorough in where to look in order to like give people probably the, you don't want to go look at something that's you might love, but it's not going to work out for you, but to give people good expectations, kind of working into that process. And then also like if you are somebody that can take like the extra time to look into, you know, pending sales or even further into the MLS, you can give expectations around. I know when I bought a home, like navigating the process, I feel like so much emphasis is put on, oh, I found a home, I got an offer accepted, but then after it is just a huge, you know, dumpster fire sometimes where there's just a lot of things that can happen. And if you can kind of look at from the seller side, you can see all of that data, you can also help people with their expectations after that, right? So all the different things that they can expect and price changes and whatever that might be.
Cool. All right. I don't have anything else. Do you have anything?
Mm-mm.
No moving
Thank you.
quotes?
No movie quotes. It's all circumstantial. It just has to be organic. That's not a line. It just has to be organic.
All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
This was super. Yeah, I'm very excited.
Who's going to go push the button?
That's true.
I can. I've already been up and down a few times, so everybody can see that how I look.
Okay.
And then I put my slippers on today because I was home and ow.
That's good.
Maybe it'll be better this time.
Or maybe it'll still be awkward. This is Alec and Elizabeth with Awkward Conversation State.